The greater your love, the stronger you hold me, baby. The stronger you hold, the more I need you. With every passing day, I love you more and every
See, Peter624 mentioned in the chat about the Jackie Wilson Said, the song Jackie Wilson Said by Betty's Midnight Runners, which I think itself is a cover of a Van Morrison song maybe, but yeah, it's a song about Jackie Wilson, not Jackie Wilson, not by Jackie Wilson. But yeah, short and sweet. That is I Get the Sweetest Feeling, Jackie Wilson. If you've only just joined us, this is my countdown of the top 30 songs of the 1960s. Not an objective list, not some sort of most successful songs, but the songs that I think are the best of the decade. The rule is I can generally only use one song from each artist. If I do use two songs, they have to be from two different albums. Same artist, two different albums. But that is kept just for the very special artist, which I couldn't bring myself to only have one song by. But that was our first song on the list, I Get the Sweetest Feeling, Jackie Wilson. Let's move on. This was sort of a late addition to the list because I was putting it together today and I realised that one of the songs in the list, one of the quite high-ranking songs in the list, was actually from 1959, not 60. So I couldn't include it in this list. It will appear in next week's list of the countdown of the 1950s. So I suddenly had this gap in my list. So I sort of thought again about what artists I might want to include. And this has always been a real favourite song of mine. This album in particular is a great album. I always think of the Velvet Underground, almost like the first ever indie band, the first ever sort of alternative band. Because they weren't really rock, but they also weren't folk or pop or anything. They were just kind of something else. Of course, the lead singer and songwriter of the Velvet Underground is Lou Reed, who went on to be famous doing some other music, including Perfect Day and Walk on the Wild Side later on in the 70s. This album in particular, which is probably Velvet Underground's most famous album, hopefully you'll see a picture of it in a minute. This isn't the picture of it. It's the one with the Andy Warhol banana on it. That's the album in question. They did this album with an artist called Nico. Nico is I think she was German, but she was a singer in her own right. So this album was kind of a collab. But you will hear Nico on this track, I think. But anyway, once again, let me know if you recognise this song. This is Sunday Morning by the Velvet Underground.
Sunday morning brings the dawn in. It's just a restless feeling by my side. Early dawning, Sunday morning. It's just the wasted years so close behind. Watch out, the world's behind you. There's always someone around you who will call. It's nothing at all. Sunday morning, and I'm falling. I've got a feeling I don't want to know. Early dawning, Sunday morning. It's all the
See Lee Epics in the chat there mentioning the Velvet Underground song Heroin, which is another song
Watch
which I did
out,
consider for this spot.
the world's
I
behind.
think I knew I wanted the Velvet Underground song,
There's always
so I went with this one. There's another one called Venus and Furs, which is a great song. It's a great album.
it's
Check it out.
nothing at all. Watch out, the world's behind you. There's always someone around you who will call. It's nothing at all.
Yes, knows what's funny. This is Lou Reed singing. Lou Reed was first famous as the singer and songwriter of Velvet Underground until he went and did his own solo thing in the 70s. The Dingus says it reminds him of the Zombies, which I can hear that, and you will not be disappointed if you are a fan of the Zombies. They will be making an appearance later on. But yeah, that was the Velvet Underground with Sunday Morning. So quite a simple little song, but number 29 on my list all the same. Let's move on. And we're back to some sort of soul music. We had Jackie Wilson before. Sam Cooke was in that picture at the beginning. We had that grid of artists. He was in the top right. And Sam Cooke has many songs that you would know. You might not necessarily know they're by him. He had a song called You Send Me. He had a song called What a Wonderful World, but not What a Wonderful World, Louis Armstrong, a different What a Wonderful World. It's kind of confusing. But this song is probably his most iconic. Slightly later in his career and very much driven by the politics that were happening at the time, namely the civil rights movement. I believe actually that Sam Cooke died when he was shot by a hotel owner in a racially motivated dispute that happened, and the hotel owner didn't get charged with it because, and then the jury was completely all white. So, which is one of those, unfortunately notorious cases of injustice due to race. But this song is an anthem of inequality and the civil rights movement. Beautifully heartbreaking, classic soul song. This is A Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Lord, there've been times that I thought I could last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gon' come. Oh, yes it will.
Change is gonna come. Sam Cooke. Timeless song, but unfortunately timeless for reasons that aren't positive. It's a shame in many ways that this song is still relevant. But anyway, that's number 28 on my list of the top 30 songs of the 1960s. Let's move on along to number 27. This is a song by Steppenwolf. You may know Steppenwolf as the band who sang the song Born to Be Wild. I think that was them. I'm suddenly questioning myself. Yes, it must have been them. Just double checking, because I would hate the idea of spreading false information. Yeah, it is Steppenwolf. Yeah, question myself for no reason. But anyway, this is perhaps their second most well-known song. This is a great tune. One of those songs where it's amazing how, this is 1968, how a couple years prior, songs this sort of like heavy and rocky hadn't really been written yet. Like in the course of just a few years, we went from, you can imagine the Mersey beat sound of the early Beatles albums to this, and it was such a revolution of sound. If you haven't heard this before, hopefully this will be a song that you now come to love, because I think this is a great track. This is Magic Carpet Ride, Steppenwolf.
Yes, right between the sound machine
extended vamp on just the one chord, all of these different sounds coming in and out. Actually reminds me a bit of like Kraftwerk, but rockier than Kraftwerk. Just like it reminds me a little bit of like Autobahn, like all the sounds that sound like vehicles going by. There you go. It's we're pretty much at the end of the song now. And we basically just had the song and then an extended sort of vamp on one chord and then a short segment of the song again, and that's it. Being it was 60s, you could do what you want. So that was Magic Carpet Ride. I saw someone in the comments mention that they previously thought that Steppenwolf were a one-hit wonder, and yeah, this is one of those bands who are highly well known for one song, and then they do actually have another song, at least another song, which is also a really good song. Mikey, so I was just looking at the chat. Mikey has just jumped into the chat for the first time. Welcome. He says, do you know why your 70s list isn't in your past broadcasts on Twitch? Yes, that is because I haven't actually published it yet on Twitch. It used to be that my Twitch streams would publish automatically after the fact, but then because of the copyright issues they get, because if you've watched any of the streams back on Twitch after I've actually streamed them, you'll notice that so many of the songs are muted out, which is really annoying, which is why I've been uploading them on my second channel on YouTube, because at least there the vast majority of the songs don't get muted, and the ones that do, I can just cut out the entire segment so you don't have to sit through silence. But that said, I have still been, generally speaking, publishing them on Twitch as well, to just for kind of completion's sake. But I had forgotten to do it, because I didn't used to have to do it. I used to do it automatically, but then the copyright issue meant that I then had to do it. I think I have literally just done it, just on my other screen here. So, yes, that is there if you want it, but it will also be available on YouTube on my second channel shortly. They're usually about a week delay after the stream itself, so if you don't want to miss out on these streams, if you don't catch the whole thing or whatever, make sure you're subscribed to my second channel on YouTube, not my first channel, my second channel. Anyway, that was Magic Carpet Ride, number 27 on my list of the top 30 songs of the 1960s. We're going to listen to this, and then there's going to be a recap for anybody who has joined us since the beginning. Stevie Wonder has appeared in my 1980s list, where he had Do I Do. He was in the 1970s list with... What did he have in the 1970s list? Can anyone remember? He was definitely in it. What did he have? Oh, it was Sunshine of My Love. That was it. And here he is again in the 60s. Of course, Stevie Wonder actually started very young. He was originally Little Stevie Wonder. And he was a very early touring Motown act whose thing was playing the harmonica, which of course he's still famous for today. But it was the early 70s really where Stevie started doing all of his really amazing creative music, like, Talking Book, Songs in the Key of Life, those sort of albums. But in the 60s, he was also doing, a fair amount of work. And in the late 60s, he came out with this song, My Cherie Amour, which is just a beautiful Motown track, very soulful. Stevie Wonder, can't go wrong. Oh wait, someone's just mentioned in the chat, I meant to say Sunshine of My Life, Stevie Wonder. Sunshine of My Love is a Cream song. But if you like Cream, hang around.
My Cherie Amour, lovely as a summer day. Sherry, you're more distant as the Milky Way. My Sherry, you're more pretty little one that I adore. You're the only girl my heart beats for. I wish that you were mine. In a cafe, or sometimes on a crowded street, I've been near you, but you never noticed me. My Sherry, oh, won't you tell me how could you ignore that behind that little smile I wore? I wish that you were mine. La 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 la. Maybe someday you'll see my face among the crowd. Maybe someday I'll share your little distant cloud. Oh, Sherry, oh, more pretty little one that I adore. You're the only girl my heart beats for. I wish that you were mine. La 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 la.
I just remembered I used to play this song in my solo piano set. It didn't stick for some reason. I need to reintroduce it because this is such a good song. It has such a unique, satisfying chord progression, as is the case with so many Stevie songs. I'm going to write that down because otherwise I'll forget again. But that was My Sherry and More, song by Stevie Wonder. I was just looking up on the internet as well. I think that song was co-written by Stevie Wonder and two other songwriters. I think the idea for this song was actually partially inspired by Michelle, by the Beatles, in the sense that they liked the use of the French, little bit of French language. Obviously here we got My Sherry and More. But yeah, Sherry and More, Stevie Wonder. You can't really go wrong with Stevie Wonder. I don't think he has any bad songs. But let's move on. Now we should be in... Yep, here's our recap. So if you've not been here for the entire stream so far, we have gone through these songs so far. We started with Jackie Wilson, I Get the Sweetest Feeling. We had Sunday Morning by The Velvet Underground featuring Nico. Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke. Magic Carpet Ride by Steppenwolf. And we just listened to My Sherry and More, Stevie Wonder. Just having a little look at the chat. I can see Counterfeit Crank has jumped into the chat for the first ever time. Thank you for joining. They were just catching up with the 1980s stream on YouTube earlier today. And I got exactly as far as Do I Do before joining the stream here. What are the odds? Exactly. So you jumped from one Stevie song to another Stevie song. And Soy Yavitu has guessed what number one will be on this list by looking at the blurry image up here. But of course, even if you identify the album here, there's more than one song that could be on that album. That's good. I'm always impressed by your guys' ability at deciphering these album arts from this blurred colour palette. But there we are. Anyone want to guess what this one is just before we listen to it? You can also see the length for the title here. In fairness, this isn't the... Well, I wouldn't say this is a not well-known song, but it's not a not well-known song either, if that makes any sense. Arabic has said that they recognise number 11, which is this one. Wonder if you're right. Quite possibly are. I don't think anyone's going to know what this is. Anyway, well, this blurry album art is actually the album art of the Village Green Preservation Society, a fantastic album by the Kinks from the 1960s. This album very much fits in with the sort of Baroque pop styling of the late 60s. Sgt. Pepper being a classic example of Baroque pop. Also, Pet Sounds being Baroque pop. Like, Baroque pop is really where it's, pop or rock music, but using some instruments more closely associated with classical music, such as strings, horns, harpsichord, that sort of thing. Stuff which, up until the Beach Boys, the Beatles, and also artists like the Kinks and maybe also the Zombies, these instruments hadn't been used in popular music. They were very much classical world music, and the idea of mixing classical and rock and roll was very alien to most musicians of the time in the 60s, and it was only until you got people like Brian Wilson and Paul McCartney who started thinking, what if we incorporated some of these sounds together? And it unlocked so much potential that we have can hear in these songs. The Village Green Preservation Society is effectively a concept album about English life, and it very much plays like that. This song is the title track from the album. If you've watched the film Hot Fuzz, which is a fantastic British film, if you've not seen that, you should, you'll recognise this song. This is the Village Green Preservation Society by the Kinks.
We are the Village Green Preservation Society. God save Donald Duck, Vaudeville and Variety. We are the Desperate Dan Appreciation Society. God save strawberry jam and all the different varieties. Preserving the old ways from being abused. Protecting the new ways for me and for you. What more can we do? We are the Draft Beer Preservation Society. God save Mrs. Moss and good old Mother Riley. We are the Custard Pie Appreciation Consortium. God save the George Cross and all those who were Waterloo. We are the Sherlock Holmes English-speaking vernacular. God save Fu Manchu, Moriarty and Dracula. We are the Office Block Persecution Affinity. God save little shots, China cups and virginity. We are the Skyscraper.
This album in its entirety is actually a really great listen. And it was one of those things where, with this list, I knew I wanted to include one of the songs from this album. I wasn't that sure which one to go with, but I went with this one. But you do need to listen to this album. If you're interested in the Beatles or any 60s music, this is an album that you should listen to.
Preservation Society. God save Donald Duck, Vaudeville and Variety. We are the Desperate Dan Appreciation Society. God save strawberry jam and all the different varieties. We are the Village Green Preservation Society. God save Donald Duck, Vaudeville and Variety. We are the Village Green Preservation Society. God save Donald Duck, Vaudeville and Variety. God save the Village Green.
Yeah, as I mentioned, this is one of many great songs on that album. Check it out if you haven't heard of it. Of course, the Kinks have loads of great songs, and there's loads of great Kinks songs I could have included on this list, but this album has a particular spot in my memory as well, so it's quite nostalgic for me. Not to say I was alive in 1968, but when I discovered this album at the age of 17, it reminds me of that time as well. But that was number 25 on my list of the top 30 songs of the 1960s. Now for something quite different. We haven't had any jazz yet in any of these streams because we haven't got further enough back in time. But we are now entering the sort of end of the jazz era. I think, by all measures, jazz, at least in the sort of way most people would recognise it, was over by the end of the 60s, replaced by rock and roll. But in the early 60s, at least, it was still hanging in there, and we had some real classic jazz albums still, like Giant Steps by John Coltrane. Now, this album is most well known for the title track, Giant Steps, which is almost like playing Giant Steps is like a rite of passage for anybody interested in jazz. But my favourite track from this album is not Giant Steps, although that is a great track. It's a far more soulful ballad from the album, called and I always pronounce this wrong. I think it's what is it? Damn. I always used to call it Name, and then I kind of found out it was wrong, but then I didn't really find out how it was wrong. And now, if you go on the Wikipedia, they've actually written it out phonetically, because obviously enough people get it wrong. Naimi. I think that's it. But anyway, it's a really beautiful song. It's the exact song you want to be listening to when you're walking around peacefully at night, just making your way back home. Beautiful example of how John Coltrane wasn't just a incredibly acrobatic saxophone player, he also had so much soul. This is Naimi, I think, by John Coltrane. Be interested to know in the chat there if, like, I'm guessing most of you guys are, primarily into rock music, as is the case with me. But I also have an affinity for jazz music, particularly because I got into playing jazz when I was a teenager. One of my friends, who was drummer in my rock band, was also a saxophonist, so we used to play a sort of little jazz duo thing. But yeah, I'd be interested to know if you guys are particularly into your jazz as well, because sometimes I feel like people who are into rock music don't feel like they can also listen to jazz, but yeah, jazz was basically the equivalent of rock music before rock music. Some jazzers in the chat by the looks of it. I think particularly nowadays, jazz is becoming a style of music is very closely associated with musos, with people like music nerds, people who are really into the technicalities of playing music, because in the same way that classical musicians study the great classical composers of the last 400 years and to sort of train themselves, modern musicians who are learning more of a blues and rock vocabulary can trace that route back to jazz, and that's where they can find an opportunity to extend their musicality. Roy Johnson is asking whether this is my last countdown list, and it is not quite. I will be doing a 1950s list. I won't be doing a 40s list because I don't think I could possibly even think of 30 songs from the 1940s, let alone my favourites. But I am going to circle back around and do a shorter list of my favourite songs from the 2020s. Although we only have had 3.5 years of the decade so far, there's still lots of songs I'd like to tell you guys about, so there will be a stream for that. And later on in the month, or maybe next month, there will also be a countdown of my top Beatles songs. Because as you can imagine from this list today, there's many Beatles songs that will not get a mention because I can only mention 2 per artist. And in all honesty, this list would be very Beatle heavy if that rule wasn't in place. So I feel like they deserve their own stream, which will be happening. Naimi or just Name if you're pronouncing it wrong, by John Coltrane. Just sneaking in here in 1960. I think it was at the beginning of 1960 as well. So I only just made it onto this list, but I love that song. It was also one of the first jazz songs I kind of discovered. I actually remember when I first got into jazz, it was back in the years where my primary way of consuming music was iTunes, and I downloaded this like massive digital album of jazz. It was like 200 tracks, and it only cost like £10 or something crazy, and this song was in there. So that was how I was first introduced to that, and I've loved it ever since. Let's move on though. Something quite different. We were talking about Cream earlier, where I was accusing Stevie Wonder of writing a Cream song, but actually Cream make this list in their own right. Of course, Cream were Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce was his name, I think, and Ginger Baker on drums. I think many people remember Cream as like the Eric Clapton band, but actually Jack Bruce had a really big part to play in Cream. He actually, for example, wrote this song, and he's the lead singer of it. It basically was his band. Eric Clapton, though, obviously did play a major role as well. There was a few Cream songs I considered, but I decided to go with White Room. Listen out for the beginning, where the intro is in 5/4, but then the bulk of the song is in 4/4. So here we are, Cream with White Room. Now on
with black curtains near the station, black roof country, no gold pavements, tired starlings, silver horses ran down moonbeams in your dark eye. Dawnlight smile on you leaving my contentment. I'll wait in this place where the sun never shines. Wait in this place.
Stereo 16 saying in the chat that that's a really unusual use of 5/4, quite hard to detect, and I didn't notice it had a 5/4 moment until I was researching my 5/4 videos a couple of years ago. I think the reason for that is because at that moment at the song at the beginning, and we'll also hear it again at the end, I think, this groove we've got now hasn't fully established itself yet, so it's more like we're just getting this pattern that we haven't quite latched onto yet, so it's hard to notice that it's repeating every 5 beats rather than every 4 beats. Back to the 5 here. The Epics is asking whether wah wah pedals existed in '68. I imagine that they just about existed, and that Eric Clapton was probably one of the first people to really use them. Of course, Hendrix used a wah wah pedal, and he barely survived beyond the '60s, so it must have existed. But it would have been very early days for the wah wah pedal, as it was for pretty much all distortion and effects pedals at that point. They were a very new concept. Just looking up the wah wah pedal now, that is definitely a wah wah pedal on White Room, so we know it existed in '68. But I don't really know when the first one was invented. It looks at a glance that it could have been like the late '60s, so it would have been very new tech. So yeah, it looks like one of the first ever ones was 1967. So yeah, right on the cutting edge. And particularly for Hendrix, who will be coming up later. The pedals and the way he used them were one of the things that made him so revolutionary, because no one had A, used these pedals before, and B, used them the way he used them, which is why his music just sounded so otherworldly and very ahead of its time. But anyway, that was White Room. Cream, number 23 on my list of the top 30 songs of the 1960s. Now for something very different. This is been one of my favourite songs for a long time. Very long time. It's a combination of a very beautiful sentiment lyrically and an amazing arrangement. The arrangement is unbelievable. The way it follows the story of the music, the very unusual chord progression that swings from major to minor, and has these little sort of Phrygian moments and other bits. I think this song won a Grammy for its arrangement. That's how good the arrangement is. And also, if you are a Simpsons fan, you will recognise this song for a different reason. I'll be interested to know in the chat whether you guys know this song. It was a Very Good Year by Frank Sinatra. Sometimes think about, I'm sure I'm not alone in the fact that I sometimes think about what songs I might ask to have played at my funeral. This might be one. Might be a bit melodramatic though. Hopefully got time to think about it though.
When I was 17, it was a very good year. It was a very good year for small town girls and soft summer nights. We'd hide from the lights on the village green. When I was 17, when I was 21,
I just love how the arrangement develops with each verse.
it was a very good year. It was a very good year for city girls who lived up the stair.
Stereo 16 says I should have
with all that perfume.
The Longest March, which is one of my pieces of music played at my funeral. Maybe.
And it came
Never thought of
undone
music I've written being played there.
when when I was 21.
Very cinematic sound to this song.
When I was 35, it was a very good year. It was a very good year for blue-blooded
Just trying to find out who arranged this, because someone in the chat mentioned who arranged it. I can't actually find out of a quick Google search, but I can see that it was originally performed by a different artist. So this is effectively a cover, a rearrangement. And I think it's probably quite thoroughly rearranged, maybe, because I can't imagine the original sounds like this. Let's find out. Gordon Jenkins, someone in the chat there.
But now the days are short. I'm in the autumn of the year, and now I think of my life as vintage wine from fine old kegs, from the brim to the dregs. It poured sweet and clear.
Beautiful sound of triumph.
It was a very good year.
It just ends with the major chord, despite being a passage in D minor. So it ends on D major, which is an example of a tierce de Picardy, a Picardy third. If you've not seen my video on that, you should go watch it. It came out quite a while ago now. I think that might have been a 2019 video. So that's a throwback. But a tierce de Picardy or a Picardy third is when a passage of music in the minor key concludes with the major chord rather than the minor chord, and gives you like a nice, bright, conclusive ending. But it was a very good year by Frank Sinatra. Now to something very different, but also kind of not different, because we've once again got that Phrygian mode going on in both of these songs. This is a great example of Phrygian, more specifically with this song, Phrygian Dominant, which is like the major version of Phrygian, but it's also, at the beginning, it's kind of like swaying between Phrygian and Phrygian Dominant. If you don't know about that, check out my Phrygian videos. Also, apologies for the very tacky lyric video thing here. Some like proper official versions of songs, they don't allow embedding. Like this is embedded in this slideshow, so I couldn't embed the proper version. It's a proper song, don't get me wrong, but it's going to have this cheesy auto-generated lyric thing. I'm sorry. But anyway, this is Jefferson Airplane, who are most well known for this song. But they have a few great songs. Someone to Love is another great song of theirs. As is Volunteers. That's a good song. And they then in the 70s went on to be called Jefferson Starship instead, which was like a sequel band, because some of the members left and some of the members didn't. I can't remember exactly, but I just love the continuity there. Aeroplane getting updated to Starship. But anyway, if you don't know this song, I'll be shocked, but let me know in the chat if that is you. This is Jefferson Airplane with White Rabbit.
and she's 10 feet tall. And if you go chasing rabbits and you know you're going to fall, tell 'em a hookah smoking caterpillar has given you the call. Call Alice when she was just small. When the men on the chessboard get up and tell you where to go, and you've just had some kind of mushroom and your mind is moving low, go ask Alice, I think she'll know. When logic and proportion have fallen slowly dead, and the white knight is talking backwards, and the red queen's off with her head, remember what the Dormouse said. Feed your head, feed your head.
Brilliant song. I don't know if you were here for the 1970s stream we did last week, but one of my issues in that stream was that there were so many long songs. So many songs were about 8 minutes long, and it made the whole stream really long. Today, I've got the opposite problem. Some of these songs are really short. That song was 2 minutes and 29. But one of the things that's really cool about that song is it's just one dynamic climb like that all the way up. You start like low and it simmers for like a minute while we've got the first two verses. Then we jump up for that sort of middleweight section. And then, as guys were discussing in the comments actually, we then kind of return to the verse, but we're now in a new key and it's now far more intense. So we never really return to what we had before. So the song can just be this one climb up and then just stop, which is something you couldn't really do if the song was really long. But yeah, just a hangover, I guess, from the, how songs used to have to be short because of the physical mediums they were sold on, and the fact that radio was so important at that time. But when we got into the 70s, the what they call album-oriented rock became more of a thing, where it became more common to consume at least rock music through buying albums than buying singles, and therefore songs could be much longer because on an album there is less restraint on each track's length. But yes, album-oriented rock, or AOR, is a phenomenon that really started with bands like Zeppelin in the 70s, but you could say the Beatles were already going towards that. Anyway, here is our second recap of the evening. We are now 1 hour into our stream. Congrats to anybody who is still here who heard us listen to Jackie Wilson an hour ago now. Let me know in the chat if you're one of those people who was here for Jackie Wilson's Sweetest Feeling. We then listened to Sunday Morning, The Velvet Underground, Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke, Magic Carpet Ride, Steppenwolf, My Sherry and More, Stevie Wonder, Village Green Preservation Society, The Kinks, Name, I need to get that pronunciation down, by John Coltrane, White Room, Cream, It Was a Very Good Year, Sinatra, and we've just listened to White Rabbit, Jefferson Airplane. And that is a third of the way through my list. Of course, these songs will only get better and better, at least in my opinion. So let's crack straight into the second half of the list. Just seeing if anybody... Melodia has been here since the beginning. So congratulations on that. You have so far listened to the entire list. Let's see if you can make it to the end. And here's the next song. We were listening to The Who last week in my 70s list with Won't Get Fooled Again, which actually ranked very highly on my list. This is lower on my list this time, but it's still a great song. It's, a timeless song, really. A song that every generation since this song has, kind of taken as one of their songs of teenage angst. Of course, now we have the irony that I hope I die before I get old. That iconic lyric from the song has now proven to not happen because the guys in the Who, Pete Townsend, Roger Daltrey, are now old. So they didn't die before they got old, but probably for the best. Fun fact: I've actually met Roger Daltrey before, because he handed out the degrees, the certificates, at my graduation ceremony about 10 years ago now. And I actually met him twice in the same evening because I went up and got my degree, and then I actually then got a special prize later on because I got one of the highest scoring dissertations ever. Not ever, in the year. So I went up again, shook his hand again. Just sort of blowing my own trumpet now, but there you go. He was a cool guy, and this is a great song. The thing that is I find so amazing about the song is his stuttering. It's such a good effect, and you can really hear the beginnings of punk in this song. All garage rock of this sort of style, the Kinks, the Who, the Sonics, they all sort of played their part in pioneering punk, but the stuttering style and the way he stutters in such a way that you think he's going to say the F word, but he doesn't, it's just so punk. Almost 10 years before punk. So, yes, here is The Who, My Generation. Also, listen out for the amount of key changes we get and the insane bass playing of John Entwistle, who is this guy over here, just playing his bass guitar as if it's a lead guitar. It's brilliant. My Generation, The Who.
People try to put us to down, talking about my generation, just because we get around, talking about my generation. Things they do look awful, talking about my generation. I hope I die before I get old, talking about my generation. This is my generation, baby. Why don't you all fade away? Don't try to dig what we all say. I'm not trying to cause a big sensation. I'm just talking about my generation. My generation. This is my generation, baby.
Amazing bass playing.
Why don't you all
So now,
fade away?
key changed up.
Don't try to
Same
dig
stuff,
what
just
we all
higher.
say.
Just adds that bit more energy.
Big sensation. Just talking about my generation. This is my generation. This is my generation, baby. My generation.
Yeah. Key change again.
People try to put us to down, just because we get around. Things they do look awful cold. I hope I die before I get old.
Keep moving the drum. These seaside images we're seeing, by the way, that's when the mods, who were like the fan base of the Who, I guess, put very simply, all kept meeting up in Brighton and kept rioting and fighting with the rockers who were more into their classic rock and roll. If you don't know about that, watch the film Quadrophenia. But anyway, I'm from Brighton, or at least I studied and lived in Brighton for a long time. So it's funny just seeing all these black and white images of them all on the beach. And it was in Brighton that I met Roger Daltrey because that's where my graduation was. But yeah, My Generation, The Who. Number 20 on my list of the top 30 songs of the 1960s. Let's move on. This is a song I discovered because of the Forrest Gump soundtrack. We were talking about Forrest Gump last week because of the song Free Bird by Lynyrd Skynyrd. Forrest Gump has an amazing soundtrack, not only because the songs in it are just all classics, but because of course, Forrest Gump is a film set across many years, following many iconic cultural events that happened in those years, and to accompany those years, we get music from that era, which means that we get a sort of journey through some of the best music of the time. This is I think this is the only song I know by Buffalo Springfield. But Buffalo Springfield was the band of Stephen Stills. Stills as in of Crosby, Nash, Stills and Young. The famous classic supergroup that formed by David Crosby from the Byrds and Graham Nash, who was from the Hollies, I think. And then Stephen Stills from Springfield. And I think Neil Young was also in Buffalo Springfield as well. But he joined later. But anyway, this is For What It's Worth, Buffalo Springfield. If you don't know this song from looking at this album art and this title, hopefully you'll recognise it. So let me know in the chat if you recognise this song.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Battle lines
Oscar,
being
welcome to the
drawn.
chat there.
Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking.
Can anybody guess the song that sampled this song?
So much
The rap song that sampled this song in the 90s?
Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's
It's
going
not Cypress
down.
Hill. Cypress Hill sampled a similar sounding song called Son of a Preacher Man by Dusty Springfield. It's although that is very similar, so good guess there. Mobile One Kenobi.
What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and a carrying signs.
Anyone got a guess for the sample? And as I mentioned, it's not Cypress Hill, but it's similar.
Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Doesn't seem that you guys know. Well, it's He Got Game by Public Enemy. That's the song that samples this song.
Paranoia
Yeah, Soy Vita. Sorry, I beat you to it. But yeah, that is it.
into your life it will creep. It starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come and take you away. We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going. We better stop now. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going. We better stop. Children, what's that sound?
I've always loved the really sort of subdued sound of the song. It's just always got it never quite goes beyond the threshold into where you might think of it as intense. It always just sits there, peaceful, but also very much not peaceful, particularly if you listen to the lyrics. But anyway, that's Buffalo Springfield For What It's Worth. I mentioned earlier that we would have the Zombies. Please forgive the thumbnail on screen. I'm sure the music will work. The Zombies are one of the more easily forgotten British invasion bands of the 60s. Partly because by the time they were blowing up in America, they had actually already disbanded, which was a bit of a tragic irony, really, because they only had 2 albums, I believe. The first one was called Begin Here or something like that, and it had the song She's Not There on it, which is quite well known. But this song, Time of the Season, is from the Zombies' magnum opus, their second album, Odyssey and Oracle. Once again, a fantastic example of Baroque pop. Definitely check out this album. It's got some great songs on it. This is probably the most iconic song from it, and personally the one I think is the best. But I think the story is that this song, on its initial release, didn't go that far in America, at least. Didn't take off. So the band then eventually kind of just broke up because they weren't getting much success. But then just shortly after they'd broken up, the song started getting picked up by radio stations in America and suddenly became, what you might call a sleeper hit. But then the Zombies weren't around to kind of capitalize on this and go and tour America because they'd already broken up. But anyway, it remains a classic song that if you don't know the title of, you will definitely recognize. This is Time of the Season, The Zombies.
It's the time of the season when love runs high. In this time, give it to me easy, and let me try with pleasured hands to take you in the sun to promised lands, to show you everyone. It's the time of the season for love.
TS to Picardy, another one. Do you remember what I said that was?
What's your name? Who's your daddy?
Oscar is asking what the rules are with this list, and that's a good point. I should remind you if you've only just joined. This list is my top 30 songs of the 1960s. Each artist can only appear once, unless I make an exception for it. And if I do, then they can appear twice. But the songs of that artist must be from two different albums. But I really do try and minimise that because I want to introduce you to as many artists as possible. Anyway, here's a fantastic keyboard solo. I love that sound that I did. Like, what a good idea.
What's your name? Who's your daddy? Is he rich like me? Has he taken any time to show you what you need to live? Tell it to me slowly. Tell you why I really want to know. It's the time of the season for love.
Stereo 16 is saying how that Picardy third there is a bit like unusual in the sense that it sounds like it should resolve to G, but it resolves to E major. The song's in E minor, so the Picardy third, as I mentioned a minute ago, is when the song resolves to the major version of the tonic chord instead of the minor. So being in E minor, when we get it's the time of the season for loving, we go to E major instead of E minor. The reason you could resolve to G is because, of course, G is the relative major of E minor. They're like the same key, right? So you could resolve to G and get a very conventional resolution, but instead it resolves to E major, which is not the relative major, but the parallel major. For more information on that, check out both my Picardy third video and my parallel key video that I did a couple years ago. Anyway, time of the season, the Zombies. If you don't know the Zombies, definitely check them out. Listen to the album Oracle and Odyssey. Beautiful album. Beautiful, beautiful album. Let's move on. So, next on the list is Them. If you don't know the band Them, then you probably do know the band, or at least the artist, Van Morrison. So Van Morrison, who is in the middle of that picture, I believe, there on screen, was the lead singer of Them, the band Them. He had a few hits with Them and then went on to have a very big solo career as well. So you may know Van Morrison's solo career better than you know Them. I mentioned a minute ago garage rock. So garage rock is a style of early rock music, 60s rock music, which you could almost call proto-punk. Bands, like songs like You Really Got Me by the Kinks, or My Generation by The Who, or Gloria by Them. Songs that sound like they could be punk songs, but they're not quite punk yet. They're still not quite in that world, but it's very much the root of punk. Simple, aggressive rock music. I guess the difference with garage rock is you've still got a fair amount of influence from blues as well. You can definitely hear the blues influence in Gloria. For this song, I was debating between this song, Gloria, and the B-side of this song, Baby Please Don't Go, which is also a great song. Baby Please Don't Go is actually a cover of a classic blues song, but Them's version of Baby Please Don't Go is excellent. But I decided to go with Gloria because not only is it an original by Them, but it's brilliant, fantastic. Really, really raw and energetic. And just imagine in the mid-60s, in the 64, hearing this song, just would have blown your head off. I think it's just, it's not necessarily heavy from a distortion point of view, but the aggression involved in the song and the energy is just amazing, considering that it would have been alongside songs like, Marvin Gaye and The Sound of Music. It would have stuck out. So anyway, without much further ado, this is Gloria by Them. Kai Lad or something in the chat says that this has been covered by many bands. A great cover version actually of the song is by Patti Smith.
She comes around here.
Just check that version out.
Just about midnight. She make me feel so good.
The Van Morrison's delivery.
I want to say she make me feel alright.
His vocals is just fantastic.
Comes walking down my street.
So much personality and ego.
Watch come to my house.
And by most accounts, Van Morrison's a
She knock upon my
dickhead,
door.
but I think that maybe gave him the ego he needed
And then she come to my room.
to sing like this.
Then she make me feel alright. G-L-Y-A. G-L-Y-A. I'm gonna shout it all night. I'm gonna shout it every day. Yeah. So good. Alright. Just so good. Alright. Yeah.
Them with Gloria. Something I didn't mention before is Gloria, Them even, are from Northern Ireland, which is, if you're not from the UK, it's one of the smaller parts of the UK, the northern part of the island of Ireland, which, if that wasn't obvious from the name, maybe you need to do some geography research. But why I mention that is because a few years ago, off the back of my YouTube channel, I met a guy called Frank, and he was originally Irish, Northern Irish. He lived in the UK for many years now, but he, in the 60s, was an early follower of Them, of Van Morrison, and he told me the story about after a gig, he went to see Them, and, saying the word Them, but it not being a pronoun is quite difficult. But anyway, he went to see Them, and then afterwards, he went down the road to the chip shop, and they, by which I mean Them, happened to be in the chip shop, and he went in and put on a jukebox that apparently was there. I've never seen a chip shop with a jukebox now, but maybe in the 60s, he put on one of their tracks, and by means of which he then wound up chatting to the guys in the band, but not Van himself, I think, because I think Van was too busy being the center of attention. But anyway, Van Morrison is probably the most well-known artist from Northern Ireland. And if you'd like to learn more about the artists from the different parts of the UK, I'm actually doing a video on that next week, hopefully, where I sort of show which parts of the UK many famous bands are from. And that will be coming out kind of in correlation with my collaboration with a very well-known geography channel. I don't know if anyone here watches a channel called Geography Now. If you do, let me know in the chat. For those who don't know, Geography Now is a channel which has been working through every country in alphabetical order for the last however many years, doing a dedicated video once a month on that country. And he has finally reached the United Kingdom, the U's. And his video format involves a music section, a section where he talks about the music from that country. And through a fairly long story, I wound up being the guy who delivers that music segment. And we filmed it yesterday, and it was great, and it was amazing to meet not only him, Barbs from Geography Now, who is someone I've watched on YouTube for a very long time, but also another YouTuber who I have a lot of admiration for, Jay Foreman, who is also featuring heavily in that video. But anyway, from the silence in the chat, I'm imagining that many of you don't watch Geography Now, but maybe you guys don't have the same obsession for geography that I do. But I will be resharing that video on YouTube, so I'm sure you will discover it. Anyway, enough gabbling on about other YouTubers I met. Here is a band who have appeared in 2 of the lists so far. They appeared in the 1980s list, they appeared in the 70s list, and here they are in the 60s, but in a very different form. Fleetwood Mac started as a British rock band with Peter Green as the lead singer and guitarist. But then when Peter Green left at the end of the 60s, early 70s, the bass player and drummer, who are the people who offer up the name Fleetwood Mac, Mick Fleetwood, and what's his name? The other guy? I can't remember. I'm going to look it up. But anyway, they went on and then started working with some Americans called Lindsey Buckingham and what's she called again? Stevie Nicks. And we then got sort of the second generation of Fleetwood Mac, which actually then went on to be far more popular and successful, and very much an American band by that point. But they started as a British band. John McVie. Yeah, so John McVie and Mick Fleetwood were the consistent members across this version of Fleetwood Mac and the second version of Fleetwood Mac. But that's fine because it's their names, Mick Fleetwood and John McVie, Fleetwood Mac, Fleetwood Mook, which wound up being the name of the band. So it kind of makes sense. Anyway, this is Oh Well by Fleetwood Mac. I mentioned a second ago that we haven't had any long songs because that wasn't very common in the 60s. But this is a long song, but only because it's part 1 and part 2. But I actually really hate when this song is only played in one part, because it's both parts together which make this song fantastic. Anyway, oh well, Fleetwood Mac. Welcome to the chat, Sack Wrist. Sack Wrist has mentioned there that he's made playlists for all of my lists. That's fantastic. I do actually publish the original playlists in the description of YouTube upload of these streams in case you want that. But if you're making them as well, that's fantastic. The more the merrier.
I can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin. But don't ask me what I think of you. I might not give the answers that you want me to. Oh, well. Now when I talked to God, I knew he'd understand. He said, stick by
Oh, that
me and
slap back
I'll be
on
your
the
guiding
vocal.
hand. But don't ask me what I think of you. I might not give the answer that you want me to.
With it breaking down to just vocal, that slapback does a lot to make it sound thicker in that moment. Now we get the more atmospheric part 2. Lee Epic is asking what slapback does. Slapback is a form of delay where the delay is so quick that it almost happens immediately after the event. And it's common on vocals, for example, because it makes it sound almost like there's two vocalists singing together, because you get the initial performance and then moments later you get the delayed performance just afterward. It really thickens out the sound, and it's like quite reminiscent of late 50s music, 60s music, like Johnny Cash, maybe like Elvis. You can also use slapback on other things like guitar. It's got that kind of rockabilly sound, I guess. But it really thickens out a vocal performance for the same reason that harmonies and double tracking do. But it's a more simple, automated version of double tracking, I guess. You can see why part 2 is sometimes not included, but I love part 2. It's atmospheric. For anybody joining us now, there will be a recap momentarily of the 15 songs we've listened to so far. We are just about to reach the halfway point in my list of 30 songs of the 1960s. Can't remember when this goes back to the heavier bit. With it for now. guys got any other predictions for what might be in the latter half of this list. Of course, there's some artists who we've already discussed will be there, and I think everyone knows what number one will be, or at least which artist will be at number one. Any other guesses? Making this list actually has been quite interesting because I've discovered a few songs I thought were from the 70s or from the 60s, which actually was quite good to find out, because if you remember from my 70s list last week, I really struggled to whittle it down to what it was. So to find out that some of the songs that were in my 70s list were 60s songs was very relieving, because it meant I could pull them into this list, which was, although tricky, nowhere near as tricky as the 70s. Oscar, you'll soon see what was in the first half. Creedence, Clearwater Revival is a good guess. But they will not be in the list. We've had the Kings, we've had the Who so far, yes. The Epics is guessing Whole Lot of Love, All Days Confused by Zeppelin. It will be Zeppelin. Zeppelin also may almost make this list twice, but I decided to limit it to once because I like to try and diversify as much as I can. Oscar is mentioning the band. The band, particularly, the only real song I know by the band is The Wait. Fantastic song. Didn't quite make the list though, I'm afraid. So, I don't really know. Does this ever go back to the rocky bit? It doesn't. For some reason I thought it did. So, apologies, I'm going to skip ahead a bit. Even after what I said about I don't like how people often don't include part 2, I'm now beginning to realise why. Because part 2 is much longer than I actually remember it being. Oscar's suggesting the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones will be making an appearance. I wonder if you can guess which Rolling Stones song it will be. But anyway, that's enough of Fleetwood Mac, I think. But this is an easily forgotten era of Fleetwood Mac, I think, is the Peter Green years. But many great songs in that time, but just not as good as their 70s and then 80s output as the new rekindled band that they were. But anyway, let's go on to that recap for anyone who hasn't been here since the beginning, like Oscar. Talk Drift in the chat there. Gimme Shouter. Strong guess for Stones. Painted Black, also a strong guess. Secreast is predicting that the entire top 5 will be Beatles. I'm afraid it has to only be... I can only do 2. 2 at maximum. I almost broke the rule when I wrote this list, but I thought, no, I cannot do that because otherwise I will just have to not talk about other artists. And I think one of the great things about these lists is an opportunity maybe to introduce you guys to something you've not heard about. And you've all heard of the Beatles. But anyway, here's the songs we've listened to so far, some of which I know from the comment section, from the chat section there, you guys weren't previously familiar with. So hopefully I've introduced you already to something new, but maybe the second half of this list will also introduce you to something else that you don't know. Of course, I'm getting into the stronger songs in the list in the second half, and therefore perhaps the more well-known songs, but there might still be something in there which you didn't already know. Mickey34394 says that he recognises the album covers of number 1, number 3, and number 11. You're not the first person to say they recognised 1 and 11, but number 3, no one said that about... Oh no, Oscar, you might be right there. You might be right. Roy Johnson is saying, I think Like a Rolling Stone, Bob Dylan, good guess. Dylan will be in the list, and Like a Rolling Stone could be a good guess. And Talk Drift recognises album number 13, which is this one. How on earth do you recognise that? I don't recognise that. I don't remember what it is. But we'll find out in a minute. Anyway, enough predictions. Let's move on to number 15. There was chatter about this song earlier, actually. This is another artist who, generally speaking, is a one-hit wonder. He did have another song, but lesser known. And I found out today actually that this song was written not by Scott McKenzie, but written by one of the people from the Mamas and the Papas. So it was one of the Papas. I can't remember which one. And that this song was used to promote a music festival. I think it was the Monterey Jazz Festival or something. It was kind of written for that, but it's a timeless song in its own right. Very much an iconic song of the 1960s and the hippie movement and the Summer of Love, which of course was 1967. I've always loved this song. I think it's a really beautiful song and got some great sort of Indian instrumentation in it later on as well. But it also reminds me of the time that I spent in San Francisco a few years ago. I went there for 5 days amongst a wider trip of California, and it's a beautiful city. And when we were there, we were very lucky for it to be beautiful sunshine as well, which in San Fran, it can often be quite foggy. But anyway, that's enough chatter. Let's listen to this. This is San Francisco by Scott McKenzie.
If you're going to San Francisco,
The Epics is also mentioned in the chat.
be sure
This is one of the first songs to use like the famous 4 chords of pop music. Not the main set, 1, 5, 6, and 4, the alternative set. So in this song, at the beginning of it, we have 6, 4, 1, 5, or in the key of A minor, in the key of C, A minor, F, C, and G. So when we return to the top of the verse here, you'll hear that chord progression, which has been used in so many pop songs.
for those who come to San Francisco. Summertime will be a loving there.
Chord progression that's very popular today,
In the
almost unheard of at this time.
streets of San Francisco, gentle people.
Roy Johnson's asking why I didn't use a music video for this one, YouTube video. And that's a good question. For some of these,
Across the
I have to instead download the song and embed it in the slideshow, because sometimes due to like copyright issues and stuff, I can't embed songs from YouTube, and this is one of those songs.
There's a whole generation with a new explanation. People in motion. People in motion. For those who come.
You might have heard there was some sitar in that sort of C section. In 1967, it was a very new thing to be doing in pop music, adding sitar, Indian instrumentation. Norwegian Wood by the Beatles, just a year earlier, was the first example of a sitar played in a Western pop record.
Francisco. Summertime will be loving there. If you come to San Francisco, summertime will be loving there.
I can see Oscar in the chat mentioning California Dreaming by the Mamas and Papas. That was a song that almost made this list, and only just missed out by the skin of its teeth. That's a great song, but I'm afraid it's not in this list. But anyway, that was San Francisco by Scott McKenzie. Let's move on to number 14 on my list, and here is our Bob Dylan entry. I mentioned in a video once before that the Freewheeling Bob Dylan, this album that you can see on screen, is one of my favourite albums ever. There was a period in my life when I was about 18, 19, 20 when I got really into Bob Dylan. Big influence on my songwriting at that time. But this album has always remained my favourite of his. I like his electric era, you know, Later in the 60s, Dylan famously swapped out his acoustic guitar for electric guitar and got a band behind him, and it was kind of controversial, which, if you can believe, but it actually was controversial at that time for him to switch from folk music to rock. Because the idea of folk rock at that time didn't exist. It was Dylan and his contemporaries who made folk rock a thing. But this is from his era where he was very much still a folk artist. This album is packed with beautiful songs. And this is one of the most iconic from it. Beautiful lyrics, beautiful song, beautiful guitar arrangement. This is Don't Think Twice, It's Alright. Bob Dylan.
Well, it ain't no use to sit and wonder why, baby. Even you don't know by now. And it ain't no use to sit and wonder why, baby. It'll never do somehow. When your rooster crows at the break of dawn, look out your window and I'll be gone. You're the reason I'm a-traveling on. But don't think twice, it's alright. And it ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. The light I never knowed. And it ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. I'm on the dark
Priest,
side
I can see you
of the
there
road.
mentioning Bob Dylan's voice.
But I wish there was something you would
Bob
do or say
Dylan,
to try
David
and
Bowie
make me change my
famously
mind and
described
stay. We never
Bob
did
Dylan's
too
voice
much
as like
talking
sand
anyway.
and glue.
But don't think twice, it's alright.
In Bowie's song for Bob Dylan. I think Dylan's voice was better suited to the folk music than the rock music, but
like you never done
it never went
before.
that right until later in his career. You know, once you get to the 80s and 90s, yeah, now Bob Dylan's voice is very hit and miss. But you know, if you listen to him
I can't
recently,
hear you anymore.
his recent performances,
I'm a thinking and
I
a wondering,
don't know.
walking down the
there's
road.
something else. But you
I
know,
once loved a
Dylan
woman,
fans are diehards,
a
so they don't
child,
care.
I'm told. I give her my heart, but she wanted my soul. But don't think twice, it's alright. So long, honey, baby, where I'm bound, I can't tell. Goodbye is too good a word, baby, so I just say fare thee well. I ain't a-saying you treated me unkind. You could have done better, but I don't mind. You just kind of wasted my precious time. But don't think twice, it's alright.
Don't Think Twice Is Alright. Bob Dylan. One of the many great songs from that album. If you've not listened to the freewheeling Bob Dylan, it's perhaps the best Dylan album to start with, I would say. Because it's got a lot of his most famous songs on it. And I think it was when he was at the peak of his folk singer powers. Of course, Dylan later went on to record a lot more folk rock music. Highway 61 Revisited would be the album to listen to for that. But I think Freewheeling Bob Dylan is the ultimate Dylan album. If you only have time to listen to one Dylan album, then that's the one you should listen to. Anyway, let's move on. Somebody correctly predicted earlier that I was going to not only include a Rolling Stones song, but it would be this Rolling Stones song, Gimme Shelter. This song has always stood out to me amongst the Stones catalogue. The Stones have got loads of great songs. But some of their songs I love, but wouldn't necessarily count as the song I would count as a favourite. Paint It Black, Street Fighting Man, they're great songs. But for me, the Stones song, which is just a cut above, is Gimme Shelter. The vibe of it, I'm not even sure how they get the guitar tone here. I haven't actually looked into it, but it's got such a cool guitar tone and atmosphere, and great intensity. Like the way the intensity builds throughout the song is beautiful, and really great BVs. It's just like some Rolling Stone songs I feel like are just a bit too much of a R&B blues number, and that's cool. But here they get a bit more into that kind of psychedelic rock sound a bit, and just winds up being a classic. This is Gimme Shelter, Stones. Great harmonica here. Here, not here, but later. There's a harmonica. I love that sound. It's sort of like distorted, bluesy harmonica. Very different from Bob Dylan. Cracks in that vocal. Amazing. See a lot of you guys talking about the female vocal on this track. Never thought to look up who it is. So I'm doing it now. Oh, Mary Clayton. I saw you guys mention that name in the chat and I realised it's Susan. was reading about how the singer Mary Clayton wound up being on this track. It sounds like very much a kind of last minute thought. They were recording the song in Los Angeles and they thought, let's have a female vocal on it, and they called her and she just turned up, apparently still with curlers in her hair, contributed a couple of takes, and that was it. She was also pregnant at the time, and unfortunately soon after suffered a miscarriage. Hopefully that wasn't to do with the singing. But yeah, she seems to have been a backing singer on many classic songs. But someone just outside of the public consciousness, I guess, because I couldn't have told you before today who she was or that she was on that track. But yeah, amazing song. Gimme Shelter, The Rolling Stones, number 13 on my list of the top 30 songs of the 60s. For some reason, I started getting confused about how many were on this list, but no, it's 30. Unfortunately, only 30. And number 12 on the list is The Doors. Last time in the number 1 spot, actually, of all things, were The Doors. Number 1 in the 70s for me was Riders on the Storm by The Doors. I've always loved The Doors, particularly the album from which this song comes from, which is their self-titled album, The Doors, which also features songs like Break On Through. It features The End, both great songs. But I decided to go with Light My Fire. It's a classic, a brilliant melding of different attributes, different elements given by different members of the band. So the iconic organ intro is contributed, of course, by Ray Manzarek, and is heavily inspired by Bach. Ray Manzarek was classically trained as a keyboard player, which is one of the fantastic things about the Doors. They're melding classical with blues, with rock. The chord progression in the verse is quite an unusual chord progression. A minor moving to F sharp minor. Very unusual thing to do. And that was contributed by the guitar player of the Doors, whose name I cannot currently remember, unfortunately. And the drummer, whose name I also can't remember right now, he contributed the sort of like almost like Latin vibe to the verse. And of course, Jim Morrison contributed the iconic vocals and lyrics. So it was very much a team effort, this song, between all 4 members of the Doors. This is Light My Fire, The Doors, and it's the full version. Robbie Krieger, guitar, yes.
You know that it would be untrue. You know that I would be a liar if I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire. The time to hesitate is through. No time to wallow in the mire. Try now, we can only lose, and our love become a funeral pyre. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
Amazing keyboard solo there. Very much one of the solos that inspired me to play keyboard. The epic mentioning that it goes to like a Dorian vamp here between I think it's A minor and B minor. The whole solo is just on that vibe. I'm pretty sure that was inspired by a Miles Davis song. can't remember which one, but just like simply vamping in a mode is a very sort of Miles Davis thing to do. There's the keyboard. Now some guitar. Secreased is asking, I'm not quite sure what they're asking, but a question about why the last live video takes long to be available. Not sure exactly what you mean by that, but to explain, I upload these streams to my second YouTube channel about a week after they've been released, about a week after they've been broadcast even, sorry. The reason for the delay is dealing with the copyright situation of like all of these songs and YouTube demonetizing it all. And like, actually, to be clear, the second channel videos are completely demonetized. I make no money from that. But the copyright issue I have to deal with is actually the blocking, because a lot of these songs I can't even play, let alone monetize. So it takes a while to get it up on YouTube. And same on Twitch. Oh yes, so Chris is saying on Twitch. The reason on Twitch is similar. The songs automatically get muted because of copyright. And that means that the VOD doesn't go live automatically like it would typically on Twitch. So I have to do it manually, and sometimes I forget. So with the previous stream, the 1970s stream, I only just published it half an hour ago because someone in the comments reminded me. So that's why. But rewatching them on Twitch isn't much fun because they're so heavily muted that you can't actually really listen to them. Anyway, here comes Jim.
The time to hesitate is through. No time to wallow in the mire. Try now, we can only lose, and our love become a funeral pyre. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire. I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on 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 fire.
Now back to that buck. Light My Fire, The Doors. Number 12 on the list. Just to answer Melodia's question in the chat there about how I deal with the copyright of these streams on my second channel. What I basically do is I upload the entire stream to my second channel. Then YouTube, within about 5 or 10 minutes, automatically detects all of the songs For the vast majority of the songs, the video gets demonetized, but I'm allowed to still publish it if I wish. But then for the odd song that happens, particularly if I've also shown the music video, because the YouTube detects the music video as well, visually, sometimes they get blocked. And when they get blocked, what I then have to do is, using YouTube's online editor device, is trim out the song from the video to automatically unblock it. But unfortunately, you can only really do that one song at a time. So it takes ages because you have to set it in motion. Then it takes like 5 hours, by which time you're not sat at your computer anymore. So then the next day you come and do another one. So it winds up taking like a whole week, really. You could be done faster if I, kept remembering to do it, but it's very much something that happens in the background. So if you have watched one of these streams back on my second channel, you'll notice that some of the songs have been removed, and that's why. But anyway, let's move on to number 11 on the list. We're almost cracking the top 10 here. And it's the Beach Boys. No surprises that the Beach Boys are on the list because they were in the picture at the beginning, but there was speculation about what song would be here. A few people claimed to have identified the album art by sort of looking at the blurred image we get at the recap, and I think you probably got it right. For me, it was a choice between God Only Knows and Good Vibrations, but for me, Good Vibrations always takes the crown. Such an amazing piece of music, even to this day, a unique piece of music. When this came out, nothing had been recorded that sounded like this. The combination of instruments, the approach to tonality and form and vibe, and it's just such a unique piece of music. One of the weird things about the song is how it's very disjointed. There's lots of different separate sections, and one of the actual reasons for that is it was recorded in various different sessions by various different musicians in various different studios. So particularly for the 60s, that meant cutting together different takes and different tapes, and it wound up with something that actually was quite disjointed, but that's part of the beauty of this track. Good Vibrations, the Beach Boys. I've got an entire video analysing this song, by the way, if you want to watch that on my channel.
I love the colorful clothes she wears and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair. I hear the sound of a gentle word on the wind that lifts her perfume through the air. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Close my eyes. She's somehow closer now. Softly smile, I know she must be kind. In her eyes, she goes with
Roy Johnson is chat there saying one of the best theremin songs. That sort of spacey sound is a theremin. Actually an example of an electro theremin, which is like a theremin but easier to play. And the theremin part on the song is actually performed by the inventor of the theremin, whose first name I can't remember, but his surname was Theremin. Mr. Theremin. You say the best theremin song. I can't even off the top of my head think of another song that has a theremin. Listen to the instrumentation of this song. Just think about the instrumentation. Harpsichord, theremin, cello, lead vocals.
I don't know where, but she sends me there.
Tape cut.
God
believe that's another thing I'm back to here. Lemon Fire Brigade, thank you so much for subscribing with Prime. If you're unfamiliar, if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to me here on Twitch for no charge. And if you're wondering what that even means, because it's actually different from YouTube. On YouTube, subscribing is a thing you do for free, right? Where you just gotta click and follow. On Twitch, YouTube subscribing is called following. And subscribing is another thing you can do above that, where you pledge a little bit of money to me on Twitch, and in return you don't have to watch ads when you enter the stream, and you get to have your own little sort of unique little like crown next to your name to show that you're a subscriber. If you have Amazon Prime, you can do that for free because Twitch is owned by Amazon, so it's like a sort of like thing you can do. So it's no charge to you, but it gives me a little bit of money. So if you are an Amazon Prime user, consider that. But anyway, we're about to crack the top 10, but let's have a recap first. So here is what we've listened to so far. If the people who were here for Jackie Wilson and the Velvet Underground and Sam Cooke are still around, you're doing very well. But we are now about to enter into the top 10 of my favourite songs of the 60s. So there is definitely one particular artist who will be making an appearance here. There's another artist actually who hasn't appeared yet in this list and will appear twice. And they are one of my favourite artists. I hold in my head a very sacred list, a very prestigious list, at least to me, of my favourite artists of all time. And I very much, if I can't conclusively decide of whether an artist deserves even to be on that list, then I just don't have anyone on the list. So my list so far in my life of my favourite artists of all time, number one, no guesses, no prizes even for guessing the Beatles. Number two is Radiohead. Number three, I decided on about a year ago, it's Phoebe Bridgers. You might be shocked by that, but actually she deserves to be there. Number four, I decided on relatively recently as well, is Elliott Smith. And number five on the list of my top artists of all time is actually Jimi Hendrix. He's an artist I've always knew I loved, and I loved so many of his songs. But I never thought of him really as like, oh, one of my favourites ever. But then I listened to his albums more. You know, he only really had 3 proper albums, and they're just all amazing. Unbelievable songwriting, unbelievable singing, unbelievable musicality, and the production and the sound and everything is just out of this world. So Hendrix will be appearing twice in the next 10 songs, but not at number 10. He's ranking a bit higher than that. At number 10 we have Space Oddity, one of David Bowie's rare 60s songs, easily forgotten that this song is a 1960s song. Looks like the Epics literally just guessed the song. Very nicely done. Yes, so Space Oddity was re-released in 1972. Once Bowie had broken through a bit more, so it had more traction. But it initially was released in 1969 on his debut album. This is another piece of music where it's just sort of crazy. Like the arrangement is just so unique. You've got Mellotron strings played by Rick Wakeman. You've got stylophone, literally stylophone, that sort of little like toy thing. That's on here. The crescendos, which were inspired by A Day in the Life by the Beatles, Bowie's unusual performance and lyrics and theme, everything in this song is just out of this world, quite literally. And something I really want you to listen out for, which is something that Bowie does quite a lot, is he will have his lead vocal and he will have his harmony, but they'll often be mixed almost to the same volume. So it's sometimes like, well, which one is the lead? He's kind of like got 2 lead melodies at once sometimes. Anyway, that's enough chatter. This is Space Oddity, and also remember this song fades in, so that's why you might not hear much at first. Guitar up in space and perform this song, and it actually obviously was an iconic YouTube video that singing this song in zero gravity, It got removed off YouTube because of a copyright complaint. But then it got brought back because Bowie, who was still alive at the time, quite rightly said, guys, chill out. But anyway, this song is also... what was I going to say? Oh yeah, actually, before I move on, can anyone guess what the first song performed live in outer space was? I give you a clue. It was performed using a harmonica and some sleigh bells that had been smuggled upon the ship, upon the spacecraft. Any guesses? Because I mentioned it in my Christmas video. So if you don't know this, you've obviously not watched my Christmas video. And yes, admittedly, my Christmas video is one of my least viewed videos because for some reason YouTube doesn't like Christmas videos. Probably because they're only relevant for like 2 weeks. Jingle Bells. Yes, Roy Johnson, Jingle Bells. It was the first song performed in space by, with instruments. And if you go watch my Christmas video. But you can wait till December if you want. It explains more there. But anyway, let's move on. Space Oddity, number 10. Number 9, Everybody's Talking, Harry Nilsson. This was one of the songs that I originally put in my 70s list and then realised it's actually 1969, which was a nice surprise to have because I love this song, but I was running out of space very much so in the 70s list, so it was nice to be able to bring it into the 60s list instead. I learned today actually that this song is a cover, but it's one of those covers where they very much, the original didn't do the song justice, and then the cover brought the song to life. This might be one of those songs that you guys don't recognise just by looking at the title and the artist, but you'll hopefully recognise when you hear it live. Not live, but in audio. For me, this song is such a good travelling song. It's a song like you're going on an aeroplane somewhere or a train, listen to this song. There's a beautiful lyric in it about going somewhere where the weather matches my clothes. And I love that idea. This is Everybody's Talking, Harry Nilsson.
Everybody's talking at me. I don't hear words they're saying, only the echoes of my mind. People stopping still, I can't see their faces, only the shadows of their eyes. I'm going where the sun keeps shining through the pouring rain, going where the weather suits my clothes, banking off of the northeast winds, sailing on summer breeze, and skipping over the ocean like a stone.
I love this bit. It's kind of like, wow. It's such a cool idea.
I'm going where the sun keeps shining through the pouring rain, going where the weather suits my clothes, banking off of the northeast winds, sailing on summer breeze, and skipping over the ocean like a stone. Everybody's talking at me, can't hear a word they're saying, only the echoes of my mind. I won't let you leave my love behind. No, I won't let you leave.
Beautiful high note. The way it comes down here. Great expression.
I
So, like many of the songs on this list, short and sweet, but beautiful piece of music that. Harry Nilsson covering Everybody's Talking. Let's move on. We're very much in the last few songs here. That's amazing. There was lots of predictions about Simon and Garfunkel. I was very sad not to be able to include anything from Bridge Over Troubled Water in my 70s list. That it was so close to making the cut, and it really should have. The 70s list was just so difficult. It should have been a top 50. But, of course, they can make the cut here. There's loads of songs that Simon and Garfunkel did that could have made this list, could have made this spot. I was mentioning a minute ago my favourite artists of all time, and I'm pretty sure Paul Simon and or Simon and Garfunkel are in that list. Potentially number 6, but I just haven't sort of... It's a bit like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but on a personal level, I have to sort of, what's the word? Induct them into the list. But anyway, I had to choose a Simon and Garfunkel song. I wasn't sure which one to go with, but I decided Mrs. Robinson, because it's a song I just come back time and time again to. Brilliant piece of music. And one of only 2 songs to feature the lyric Cuckoo Kajoo. This is Mrs. Robinson. Decreased 1968 to 1973. That's a good suggestion for the best 5 years ever of music. I would go 67 to 72, and to be really safe, I would go 66 to 1976.
And here's to you, Mrs. Robinson. Jesus loves you more than you will know. Whoa, whoa, whoa. God bless you, please, Mrs. Robinson. Heaven holds a place for those who pray. Hey, hey, hey.
Maybe I need to do a video on that. Do I need to do a video on like the best decade of music ever? And the answer being 66 to 76, and just showing all of the fantastic songs that were released in that time. Is that a good idea? Should I do that on my YouTube channel?
Look around you, all you see are sympathetic eyes. Stroll around the grounds until you feel at home. And here's to you, Mrs.
I seem to agree.
Robinson. Jesus loves you more than you will know.
I'm going to add it to the list.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. God bless you, please, Mrs. Robinson. Heaven holds a place for those who pray. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. Hiding in a hiding place where no one ever goes. Put it in your pantry with your cupcakes. It's a little secret, just the Robinsons affair. Most of all, you got to
I can see you guys talking about The Graduate, the film The Graduate, for which this song was written. That is a film I do need to see. It's one of those films that everyone knows is a classic, but only some people have seen. And it's also one of those films, I'm pretty sure the moment I watch it, I'll notice lots of references that I've seen in other things. I know there's a Simpsons episode that references The Graduate.
Sitting on a sofa on a Sunday afternoon, going to the candidates' debate. Laugh about it, shout about it when you've got to choose. Every way you look at it, you lose. Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? Our nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Ooh, what's that you say, Mrs. Robinson? Joe to Joe has left and gone away. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey.
That lyric about like, where did you go, Joe DiMaggio? Pretty sure Joe DiMaggio is like a baseball player or something. I wouldn't know on the side of the pond. I've heard a story that I think it's true that Paul Simon once met Joe DiMaggio, and Joe DiMaggio was like, "What do you mean? Where did they go? I've been here the whole time." And it was just a bit of an awkward exchange because, of course, I think Paul Simon was speaking a little bit more like figuratively about how, and as I said, I don't really know who Joe DiMaggio even is, but about how he was an iconic American figure, and then he kind of faded from relevance, and it's about like the culture he knew fading. But anyway, that was only kind of a half anecdote because I don't really know who the characters even were. Here we are. The GOAT. I was saying a minute ago about how Jimi Hendrix is my 5th favourite artist of all time. Here is my 2nd favourite Jimi Hendrix song. I also have mentioned in the stream how amazingly short some 1960s songs are. This has to be perhaps one of the most criminally short songs ever recorded. There is no reason, as far as I'm aware, for this song to be as short as it is, because I don't think it was even a single. If it was, it could have been longer on the album, surely. Like The Doors, The Doors, Light My Fire we had earlier. The single version was like 3 minutes long and the album version was 7 minutes long. This song came out the same year. Little Wing should have been longer, but I guess Hendrix wanted it to be the length it was. We can just listen to it again if we want to listen to more of it. But you'll hear what I mean. When the song starts to end, you're like, why aren't we returning to the previous section? We could, but instead it just ends at what? Like is it 2 minutes 25? I guess it could be shorter, but it still needs to be longer. Anyway, it's very hard for me to pick my favourite Hendrix songs, but this song is just beautiful. Everything from the guitar playing, the melodies, the lyrics. Hendrix is well known, of course, for his guitar playing, but he was really just an all-round amazing musician and songwriter. This is Little Wing. Great glockenspiel as well. Mitchell's drumming.
Well, she's walking
Oh, such a good drummer.
through the
Such a groove.
crowd with a circus mind that's running wild. Butterflies and zebras and moonbeams and a fairy tale.
You can hear the birth of John Frusciante in the song as well.
Riding with the wind.
Or this bit. No, not this bit. Next bit.
When I'm sad,
Still good though.
she comes to me with 1,000 smiles. She gives to me free. It's alright, she said, it's alright. Take anything you want from me.
This is the bit I was talking about. It's just guys.
Fly on, little
See, Ek Crisp mentioning that would I ever recreate any Hendrix songs on YouTube like I've recreated Beatles songs and The Doors. I would love to. I feel it could run into disaster though, because the Hendrix estate are well known for blocking loads of Hendrix stuff off YouTube. For the longest time, you couldn't actually even listen to the original Hendrix songs on YouTube. There was no way to listen to Hendrix on YouTube, which meant that you actually had on YouTube at one time, if you searched, I don't know, All Along the Watchtower Hendrix into YouTube or Purple Haze, you'd get some naff cover version, but presented as the original. Like, it would just say Purple Haze Hendrix. It wouldn't say cover or anything. And you unfortunately had people in the comment section who seemingly thought this was the original, and they're listening to this and thinking, this is Hendrix? It's crap. And, you know, it was just one of the examples of when, like, these people who hold the copyright to these classic song catalogues have just no idea about how music is consumed today. And the fact that they're shutting down people listening to it on YouTube is the equivalent of them hearing their song being played on the biggest radio station in the world and then calling up halfway through the song and saying, excuse me, I didn't give you permission to play my song. Why are you playing my song on the biggest radio station in the world? It's like absurd, isn't it? It's just absolutely absurd. Anyway, thankfully, you can now listen to Hendrix on YouTube, but I'm pretty sure it's still pretty dodgy to upload covers and stuff of Hendrix because you could easily get blocked. Maybe, I don't know. These policies change all the time, and they change quietly as well in the background. So it's very hard to tell. But it's something I would love to recreate. Something I would have to polish up my guitar chops, though. Just a bit. Hendrix to Led Zeppelin. What a transition. There was lots of Zeppelin songs I could have put in this spot. I was very close to putting 2 Zeppelin songs in the list. But I settled on just this one. Of course, Zeppelin were only just in the 60s. They were predominantly a 70s band. I've often found it amazing how well they parallel the Beatles, actually. Because, of course, the Beatles were a 4-piece British band who came along in the 60s, pioneered and revolutionised music, and then at the end of the decade, quickly disbanded. And that was it. Same with Zeppelin, but for the 70s. But they did, of course, Zeppelin did, as we can see here, creep into the 60s. They were here just at the beginning of the 60s, but ultimately they were a 70s band, came along, pioneered, invented classic rock, invented metal, and then by the end of the 70s, ended, largely because of John Bonham dying. But anyway, this is Good Times, Bad Times. I love the drumming on this track. And the guitar solo, when the guitar solo comes on this track, it's like explosive. It's just like the song, you'll hear it in a second, there's a gap, the song stops for a second, and then it's almost like they pulled this lever, and it's like, okay, guitar solo, go. And it's just so impactful. And the fact that this was 1969, it's just like, this would have blown people's heads off. Good Times, Bad Times, Led Zeppelin. Listen to this drumming. Double kicking.
No matter how I try, I find my way to the same old jam. Good times, bad times, you know I've had my share. When my woman left home for a brown-eyed man, but I still don't seem to care. 17, I fell in love with a girl as sweet as could be. It only took a couple of days till she was rid of me. She swore that she would be all mine and love me till the end. But when I whispered in her ear, I lost another friend. Oh, good times, bad times, you know I've had my share. When my woman left home for a brown.
Are we ready to pull the guitar solo lever? Here it is. Oh man, it's completely saturated.
You know I've had my share. When my woman left home for a brown-eyed man, but I still don't seem to care. I know what it means to be alone. I sure do wish I was at home. I don't care what the neighbors say. I'm gonna love you each and every day. You can feel the beat within my heart. Real life, sweet babe, we ain't never gonna part.
Hendrix. No, not Hendrix. Sorry. It's late. Zeppelin. Hard to choose one Zeppelin song. As I mentioned before, I almost chose two. But I didn't quite find the space for two. But good times, bad times. That is just such a tune. Alright. I think that gives us one last recap before we enter the final five. The top five. My top five choices for the 1960s. I know there's one band that you know will be in this list. I've also mentioned how Hendrix will be appearing again, because we've had one Hendrix, but we're going to have another Hendrix. But there's 5 entries here. So what could these all be? There's one artist actually who was on the picture at the beginning, the kind of image of all of the artists. This one. There's one artist on that picture that we haven't seen yet. And we're going to see him not at number 5, but number 4. So just before that, let's go to number 5 on my list of the top 30 songs of the 1960s. Wichita Lineman, Glenn Campbell. Not sure anyone has guessed this song or saw it coming at all. But this is a song which I've always thought is just utterly beautiful. It's such a perfect depiction of loneliness and isolation, and it just paints such a vibe and story in your mind. It's not written by Glenn Campbell. It's written by a iconic songwriter whose name has escaped me. I don't know if any of you in the chat can remember who wrote this song. If you can beat me to Googling it. But this has to be one of the most achingly beautiful songs ever written. And it was written by... I'll give you guys a couple more seconds, because I now know. No one's guessed. Okay, it's Jimmy Webb. Jimmy Webb wrote this song. Classic sort of country-esque songwriter. Who wrote loads of classic songs, many of which were made famous by Glenn Campbell. He also wrote By the Time I Get to Phoenix, which was performed by Glenn Campbell. He also wrote Galveston, and he wrote MacArthur Park, a bunch of songs. But this is one of his most beautiful, perhaps. Let's just have a listen to it. But one of the lyrics though that I just want you to listen out for, which I really think highlights how beautiful the song is and I need you more than want you, and I want you for all time. And that, coupled with the image of this engineer working on the remote phone lines in the desert, hearing the buzzing coming down the lines and thinking about that being the voice of his missing, the person he misses back home. Wichita Lineman, Glenn Campbell.
I am a lineman for the county, and I drive the main road, searching in the sun.
Sorry, I cannot be looking at this video.
I hear you singing in the wire. I can hear you through the whine, and the Wichita
flute or something. It might be a synth.
I know I need a small vacation, but it don't look like rain. And if it snows, that stretch down south won't ever stand the strain. And I need you more than want you, and I want you for all time. And the Wichita lineman is still on the line. And I need you more than want you, and I want you for all time. And the Wichita lineman is still on the line.
Azuron7. Thank you for subscribing to Prime. That's much appreciated. Sorry, I only just noticed that in the chat. But yeah, beautiful song. One of my favourite songs of all time. Wichita Lineman, made famous by Glenn Campbell. I decided to hide the video because it was incredibly cheesy and it was ruining the song. Whoever made this slideshow thing decided to literally illustrate every lyric in the song, completely destroying any sense and opportunity of your own imagination and imagery. But anyway, for reasons I've mentioned already in the stream, I can't always use the original proper version of the song here on my stream. So sometimes I have to settle for these like rubbish versions. And that was a particularly rubbish version, but the sound quality was great. So all we needed to do was just hide it behind this thing. But anyway, really getting into the final few songs here, all of which are out of this world songs. I wonder if any of you can guess the next song with these two clues. One, it is an artist from this picture I'm about to show you, which hasn't appeared yet. So here's the picture. Okay, so it's one of the artists on that picture. And secondly, it's the second example in this list of a song that uses the time signature 5/4. We had White Room by Cream earlier, which has an intro and sort of like middle section in 5/4. But the next song on the list is actually entirely in 5/4. And that, coupled with some beautiful string arrangements and some very unique guitar playing, gives us, yes, E.K. crisp. You've got it. Riverman, Nick Drake. If you don't know who Nick Drake is, you should check him out. He's one of the tragic figures from music. Someone, I saw him very aptly described recently in a video as the Van Gogh of music, in the sense that his music was not really properly appreciated within his own lifetime, and he actually lived a very turbulent, almost kind of miserable life, plagued by mental health issues. But then years after his untimely death, suicidal death, he became highly acclaimed. And for anyone who's a singer-songwriter, particularly someone who writes folky songs with an acoustic guitar, Nick Drake is required listening, and Riverman is probably his most well-known and distinctive and iconic songs. Beautiful piece of music. Also, another song which I thought was a 1970s song until I came to make the list, and then I realised it's a 1960s song. It's 69, which actually is a testament to how kind of ahead of its time it is. But anyway, there's only one way to realise how great the song is, and that is by listening to it. This is Nick Drake, Riverman.
Betty came by on her way, said she had a word to say about things today and fallen leaves. Said she hadn't heard the news, hadn't had the time to choose a way to lose, but she believes. Gonna see the riverman, gonna tell him all I can about the plan for lilac time.
Yeah, the epics, you've just noted exactly what I was going to say, how we got this
If he tells me all he knows
swing from minor to major going on.
about the way his river flows, and all night
So here it resolves to the major chord.
in summertime.
It's kind of weird eeriness, I guess. Yes, similar to the Frank Sinatra song. We listened to earlier, pretty much it wasn't earlier. This is also a song which I didn't realise was in 5/4 until years after I first listened to it. So it's a good thing. Natural use of the meter.
Betty said she prayed today for the sky to blow away, or maybe stay. She wasn't sure, for when she thought of summer rain calling for her mind again, she lost the pain
Lee Epic's a couple of songs for your list
and stayed for
of
more.
songs that go from minor to major, parallel minor to major, which are older than Penny Lane. You Don't Own Me by Leslie Gore. I believe that's older than
Gonna
Penny
tell
Lane.
him all I can
And My Favourite Things from The Sound of Music, which is definitely older. That goes from minor to major, or the other way around.
free.
No, yeah, minor to major, it does do that.
If he tells me all he knows about the way his river flows, I don't suppose it's meant for me. Oh, how they come and go. Oh, how they come and go.
If you're not familiar with Nick Drake, I'd check him out. He's only got 3 albums. But he's got, and you know, Riverman, as you can see from this list, is my favourite song by him. But he's got loads of great songs. And particularly if you are into your kind of folky, singer-songwritery music, he's a must listen. So that was number 4. We've only got 3 songs left, and we're yet to see a particular Liverpudlian group who, maybe they'll make the list, I don't know. But before that, a bit more Hendrix. I mentioned a minute ago that Hendrix is one of my favourite artists, and therefore he has made this list twice. But of course, they have to be songs from different albums, because that's my rule. So the first Hendrix song we listened to was Little Wing from Axis, Bold as Love. And this is instead from Electric Ladyland, which came out the next year, I believe. And I think everyone at this point knows that this song is a cover of a Bob Dylan song. A cover that wildly improves on Bob Dylan's original. Not to say Bob Dylan's original wasn't good. It's a fine song, perfectly fine, but not. Hendrix just lifted this song into the stratosphere. Basically, rewrote the whole thing. Also, this is another song that was on the Forrest Gump soundtrack. Forrest Gump, beautiful, beautiful soundtrack. One of my absolute favourite films of all time as well. Anyway, All Along the Watchtower. Something actually I wanted to mention here. I did a video a while ago about confusing intros, and to me this is an example of a confusing intro. But to some people it's not, and that's really interesting because basically what happens is at the beginning of this song, different people hear the downbeat in a different place. Some people hear it in a place where it makes for a completely unconfusing intro. It makes a completely logical sense. And yes, it's the more simple choice, and of course that's probably what was intended. However, try as I might, I cannot hear the downbeat, where it would make the more logical sense. To me, it undeniably sounds like it happens an eighth note earlier, a quaver earlier than what other people think. And because of that, it means that there's a moment 8 bars into the song where it feels like we've got a bar of 9/8, because I've got this extra eighth note knocking around in my internal sense of rhythm. So it's going to be interesting to see what you guys think. I don't really understand how different people are hearing it so differently, but that's what's happening. I'll let it play for a minute, not a minute, but a few seconds, and then I'll let you know where I hear the one, and let me know if that's consistent with what you're hearing, or if I'm suddenly counting on the offbeat. Because if I'm counting on the offbeat, that means that you're hearing it in the more logical place, because I hear it in the non-logical, confusing place. Anyway, let's see what happens. This is where I hear it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You see what happens? It kind of goes out of time.
There must be some kind of way out of here, said a joker to the thief. There's too much confusion, I can't get no relief. Businessman there, drink my wine. Plowman, dig my earth. None will ever own the mine. Nobody of it is worth. Hey. No reason to get excited. The thief be kindly spoke. There are many here among us who feel that life is but a joke. But you and I, we've been through that, and this is not our fate. So let us start talking falsely now. The hour's getting late. Hey!
guitar playing, man. Something that is easy to forget with Hendrix is he wasn't just technically great or like creatively great, but he was melodically great. These solos, they're little melodies. They're not just random noodling in the pentatonic scale. They're things you can latch onto and sing.
Kept of you, while all the women came and went, barefoot servants too. Well, outside in the cold distance, a wildcat did growl. Two riders were approaching, and the wind began to howl. Hey!
Yeah, the drumming on Hendrix stuff is amazing. Mitch Mitchell on drums. And there what's his name? Noel Redding on bass. He's also great. The bassist sings on a couple of the album tracks actually. Just another. Hendrix is just, because he was so pioneering, it's so easy to focus on the guitaring, but everything about Hendrix, his band, his songwriting, his vocals, his guitar performances, is brilliant. Spot on every time. All right, 2 left, and as I mentioned, there's one band who just haven't arrived yet, and I think it will come as no surprise that they're about to get here. There's been speculation on which Beatles songs would be in these spots, but which ones do you think they'll be? Okay, Mickey or Mikey, 34394. Just one guess. Blew it out of the park. Hey Bulldog, the Beatles. If you've been paying attention to my videos over the years, I have mentioned both Hey Bulldog and Strawberry Fields as my favourite songs, so it technically is no surprise, but only if you've been paying attention. Now, Hey Bulldog here, I used to regard it as my favourite song ever, and also therefore my favourite Beatles song. It got surpassed by Strawberry Fields when I got a bit older and I kind of started to appreciate Strawberry Fields even more. But Hey Bulldog, for me though, is like the song that got me into the Beatles, because the song my dad used to play. He played other Beatles songs, of course, but this song in particular, I remember. There's just something about this song. It's just so good. Also, interesting fact about the video here. This is a unique example of us seeing video footage of a Beatles song being recorded in the studio. But the reason behind that is really interesting. Basically, the Beatles were going to be involved in this documentary that was being made about music. So the film crew came in on like a random day when the Beatles were recording in the studio. And the song that was going to be used in the documentary was Lady Madonna. But the Beatles had already recorded Lady Madonna. They weren't going to waste their studio time miming to Lady Madonna. So what they did is they just set about recording Hey Bulldog. The film crew filmed Hey Bulldog, and then they tried to synchronize the footage of Hey Bulldog to Lady Madonna, and that's what they used in a documentary. It was the 60s. I guess people didn't care that much about synchronization. Anyway, of course, years later, some bright spark realized that we've got this footage of Hey Bulldog being recorded but synchronized to Lady Madonna. Let's take it, resynchronize it with Hey Bulldog. And now we actually have a version or a video of Hey Bulldog being recorded. So it's a really weird backstory to how it came about. But we got there in the end. So here is Hey Bulldog, by the Beatles. Number 2 on my list of the top 30 songs, original songs, like new songs. It's songs that appeared on previous records. The B-side of the record is all cinematic soundtrack music written by George Martin for the film. So really, it's just such a non-album, but with a few hidden gems, including Baby You're a Rich Man, Only Northern Song, It's All Too Much, and Hey Bulldog, which fucking rocks. What was the other thing you said? One of the few Beatles songs that has actual video footage. Yes, Jay, you've turned up late. I'm sorry. I've already told them about this. Roy Johnson, you've got the other fact I was going to say, that it was originally Hey Bullfrog, but then they changed it to Bulldog because Paul started doing that barking, improvising thing where he does a very impressive dog bark impression. It's also just a great example of John writing a song that makes no sense in any way at all, but it just proves that lyrics don't have to mean stuff. They can just be there as sounds, as like a shell for the melody to be carried upon. You don't have to always worry too much about what your lyrics mean, as long as they're exciting and they have good imagery to them and above all, a good sound to them, like the syllables work. Jay left the room. Jay, you cannot leave the room when I'm streaming. I'm sorry. Anyway, we're here now. We have one more song. We all know what artist it is, and we all admittedly know what the song is. It's Strawberry Fields Forever. My favourite song in the entire world. This is a song that the more I've studied it and learnt about it over the years when I've made these videos, the more I actually come to appreciate it. I think some people think that when you learn about a song, when you pick it apart, it can kill it. Actually, this song, it becomes more amazing. Like how can you create a piece of music like this? There's so much sort of backstory and interesting elements to how this song came to exist. If you're not familiar with the story behind this song, and the fact that it's actually two songs stitched together, two songs that were in different time signatures. Two different songs that were in two different tempos, two different keys, and they were brought together using vari-speed in the middle, and it's just amazing. I have a video on it. Check it out. I will let you know where the cut is. It's at basically 1 minute in, and you'll hear how the instrumentation suddenly goes from guitars and bass and normal stuff to suddenly orchestration, cellos, horns, that sort of thing. Anyway, my favourite song of the 1960s and my favourite song of all time and my favourite Beatles song, but that kind of follows by default. Strawberry Fields Forever. New fan in the chat is asked what my favourite Beatles album is. And my answer is usually Sgt. Pepper, but I find it difficult to say that because by all rights, Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane should have been on Sgt. Pepper. They weren't because the record label wanted them to put out a new song, and because the Beatles hadn't put out a song in a while, so they decided to take the first two songs they had recorded in the Sgt. Pepper project, which were Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane, release them together. Now, I saw someone in the chat mentioning how that makes for a bloody great single, right? Double A side, Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane. It was the first Beatles song not to hit number one in the UK after a long, multi-year chain of them all hitting number one. I think it missed out on number one because of like Engelbert Humperdinck's The Last Waltz or something utterly forgettable, something like that. There you go. Pop music is pop music. It never changes. People still can't make the greatest song of all time number one. At least it got to number two. But that's my problem. So my favourite Beatles album is Sgt. Pepper, but the problem is that I know there is a universe where that album is even better, and it's a shame I don't live in that universe. It's one of the tragedies of how the Beatles music is now catalogued, because we all think about rock music being catalogued by like, okay, which album is that from? But the Beatles didn't always release their songs on albums, and therefore some of the greatest Beatles songs can easily be missed if all you do is listen to albums. But anyway, as I mentioned earlier, will be doing a countdown of my favourite Beatles songs, exclusively my favourite Beatles songs, my top 20 Beatles songs for that matter, because I couldn't include more than 2 Beatles songs in this list, otherwise the whole thing would just be Beatles. Wednesday, the 14th of June, will be the Beatles countdown video. It's in the schedule on my Twitch channel, so you can get it to like remind you or whatever, or put it in your own diary. 14th of June. But in the meantime, before that, I have got other things coming up. For example, next Wednesday, this time next week, I will be counting down my favourite songs of the 1950s, which we very much start getting into a decade there where I don't know if I have 30 favourite songs of the 1950s. It's amazing how suddenly we go from the 60s and all of this richness of musicality, and we go to the 50s, and it's a little bit harder to find stuff. But as I mentioned earlier, I am a big fan of swing and jazz, and that will be playing into that. We've also got some rock and roll still, other things, and some songs that are surprisingly ahead of their time as well. Songs that I thought were in the 60s, but actually are in the 50s, and so they've made their way into that list. Anyway, that will be this time next week. Thank you so much for watching again. If you've missed any of this if you missed any of this stream, I combine the word stream and Twitch. It will be available on my second YouTube channel, and it should also be available in a heavily butchered form on Twitch itself as well at some point. But anyway, thank you again for watching. Have a very good evening, and I will see you again this time next week for the 1950s.